My new book, Peace Over Pain, is now available. You can buy it for $20 on Amazon, or you can download it for free inside my exclusive Facebook group. Simply go to peaceoverpain.com/join the group. And between the group and the book, you will learn how to eliminate chronic conditions.
Welcome to Inner Peace with Dr. Reese, a program that can help you become liberated in the modern world. Now, here's your host, Dr. Kevin W. Reese.
So, what's the secret behind the secret? Welcome to episode number 164. Today, I'm talking with Dr. John DeMartini. He's a specialist in human behavior, a public speaker, and an author of 40 best-selling books. Most notoriously, he was in the classic documentary, The Secret. Before we begin, sit down and relax and take in this important conversation. Now let's begin. Dr. DeMartini, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So, is it possible to master life?
You know, no matter how much you know, there's always the mysteries that extend beyond what you know. But at any one moment, you can reach a state where you're grateful, you're loving where you are and what you're doing. You're inspired by the vision that you're on. You're enthusiastically working towards fulfilling it. You feel certain about the path and you're very present. So in that moment, you have a moment of mastery. But I don't think that anybody is living 24 hours a day in that state. I certainly have never met anybody that did. And I've met many, many, many teachers along the way. So can you master life? You can have moments of mastery and moments of the next illusion that you're going to work on. I set out when I was 18, which is 50 years ago because I'm 68 now. At the age of 18, I was watching Kung Fu with David Carradine. You might remember that show. I don't know if you maybe too young to
Before
remember
my
that
time, but I know of it.
Yeah, but it was around 73. And he had a Shaolin master that he would refer to and kind of in the back of his head to have the conversations with. And he was his master. That was his master martial artist. And so at that day that I watched that show, I thought I would love to be a master. So I thought, okay, what exactly does that mean? What does that represent? Yeah, nice to say, but what exactly is the context of that? And so I've been working on that for 50 years. What exactly is that? I broke life down into 7 areas, not because that's the truth, it's just a model. And I believe that we all have some sort of a inspired mission quest. We could call it a spiritual quest if you want, but it's an inspired mission that we feel that we're here, you know, something we feel destined to fulfill. Deep inside, our intuition is whispering it at all times. We also have a mind development quest. We want to create some sort of original ideas that serve an innovation quest, a learning quest, an intelligence quest. I mean, when you stop and look at it, if you're a young woman, you're looking for a man that's fit. You're looking for somebody that's intelligent. You're looking for somebody that's got ambition. You're looking for somebody that's got some resources. You're looking for somebody that wants to be with you, somebody that's got social connections and savvy, and somebody that's inspired. So if you look at what people are looking for in relationships, they're wanting somebody that's empowered in as many of those areas as possible. So I broke them into 7 areas. And then I defined for me what I believed mastery was for me and my values. Not that that applied to anybody else, but just for me. So I had my own path that I wanted to go and fulfill. So I wanted to create original ideas that served human beings and contribute on a level that was like a great thinker of earlier centuries, or somebody that had a massive contribution in a field and contributed something that was novel. I want to be inspired by my mission, which I felt blessed to do. I've been working on my mission for 50 years. I knew it when I was 17. I wanted to create a global business that served people in every country on the earth. That's something I set out to when I was 18. I wanted to be financial independence, where there was, my money's working for me. I don't have to work for money. I want to have a global family, a citizen of the world, or the citizen of the universe, as Socrates and Epictetus and Einstein described. The ship that I live in is called the world. So I'm a citizen of the world. I live on the world that goes around the world. That was planned and structured to do. I wanted to have a family that was around the world, so I have a global family. I want to have social contacts. I made a list of the most powerful people on the planet in every field, and I want to participate in learning from them, or interacting with them, or hanging out with them, or whatever. And I've metriced all of these things. I want to have a vital body. I want to have, tremendous body and a good vitality going. And I can still do 20 hours a day at 68. So to me, the empowerment of all those areas and ongoing expansion in each of those areas, because I've never met anybody that wanted to shrink in any of those areas. They all want to keep expanding it.
Right.
So to me, the path of mastery is a continued expansion in each of those areas based on your own hierarchy of values and how you perceive it to be fulfilling. You may want to grow a magnificent family. You may want to have a social cause. You may want to be a politician. You may want to have a Nobel Prize. I don't know what that is, but whatever is yours, the pursuit of that and the fulfillment of that, and living by priority in such a way that you're incrementally building momentum towards what it is you do, and having many moments of grace and gratitude for feeling that you're on track and life is on the way, not in the way, to me is a moment of mastery. So I set out to do that at age 18. I knew my mission at 17, and I've been working on it for 50 years.
It's well-rounded.
Any area of your life you don't fulfill and empower, other people are going to overpower you. It's just life.
Yeah.
So if you don't empower yourself intellectually, you'll be told what to think. If you don't empower yourself in business, you'll be told what to do. If you don't empower yourself financially, you'll be told what you're worth. You don't empower yourself in your family, you'll be doing honeydew stuff around the yard and house that you don't want to do, that you could be delegating. If you don't empower yourself socially, you've got misinformation campaigns all around you, bombarding you. If you don't empower yourself physically, you'll be told what drugs to take and organs to remove, and or what vaccines to take, or whatever, who knows. And if you don't empower yourself spiritually, you'll possibly be subordinating to some Aristotelian anthropomorphic deity that's still hanging around. So to me, expanding and empowering all those areas and living in the journey and seeing that no matter what happens in our life, it's all on the way towards that objective, is a state of great fulfillment. And to me, any moment where you can say thank you with a tear of gratitude in your eyes, you're having a moment of mastery.
I had one yesterday. It's beautiful.
I have them multiple times a day.
That's great. And for those listening, you're on a ship right now. You live on a ship that's like the size of a cruise ship. How does that happen?
Well, there are cruise ships that make my ship look tiny, because they're 2,000-foot ships.
Yeah, yeah.
Mine's only 675 feet long. So, but yes, I've been living on a ship for 21 years.
Wow.
So I've traveled over 20 million miles on flights, and I've traveled, I don't even know how many thousands of miles. I have to look at my record on that on board the world. So I do partake in full-time travel. We're sailing right now even though it doesn't probably notice it, there's not a lot of movement where we are. It's a pretty calm ocean right now. Sometimes those curtains are moving around.
So if let's just say you had an engagement or a speaking gig or something, and let's just say New York, you just tell the captain to head to New York?
Like I just had a speaking engagement in Israel recently, in Ashdod. And we sailed into Ashdod, so I was able to do it right there. So sometimes I'm able to be right in the port, or they'll pick me up from wherever I am and wherever I come in. Sometimes we're not in the port. Sometimes we're tender in on a tender, or sometimes they'll heliport it in. But I sometimes speak right there. Sometimes since COVID, I've been doing a lot of programs online. I mean, I've done probably 320 programs online this year. And then sometimes I'll get and go to a nearby airport and fly to another country, like I did in Munich recently, because I had a big conference in Munich that I was speaking at. So I flew to Munich, and I've got one coming up in London that I'll do. And we'll do one in India. I'll be sailing into India doing live in Sydney, and the same thing in the Emirates coming up. We have a couple of them in the Emirates that are live right there. Right. So sometimes I'm able to do it where it's located. Sometimes I get off and I fly somewhere.
And did you have this? Was this a vision that you had when you were younger? Hey, I want to be on the water.
No, my vision. I wrote down November 18th, 1972, that I wanted to step foot in every country on the face of the earth and share what I learn about life and teach. So I knew I had learning problems as a child. I didn't read till I was 18, and I had a speech impediment as a child. So one night, one man inspired me in Hawaii and made me believe that I could overcome that. And that night I had an epiphany, a vision, which I have painted in my office. It's 5 foot by 4 foot by Andrew Tischler, a famous painter, painted this magnificent vision of me speaking with every major iconic building in the background from around every country and every city around the world, major city. It was a beautiful painting. I showed it to you. It's amazing. But so I had a dream of traveling the world and stepping foot at every country and sharing. I've spoken in 186 countries now, so I'm not quite finished, but I'm still working on it.
Wow.
I still got a few countries this year that'll be different. But that started then. The desire for mastery didn't start till 18. But I didn't have the vision of the ship. I just knew I wanted to be a global citizen. I studied perpetual traveling. When I was very young, I had an image of the globe. I had a map of astronomy looking back at the earth. I had clocks from every country in my office. I made sure that I positioned myself globally. And I was amazed how the universe opened doors for me. But it wasn't until 1999, I was reading the Robb Report. I was living in Trump Tower at the time, right underneath the Donald. And I was reading the Robb Report, and it showed this ship that they were planning on building. And I thought, now that's pretty cool. I showed it to my wife, and she thought, that's an amazing ship. That's the one and only ship in the world. It never been built like that. And I said, I would like to own that, and or be part owner or something of that. And anyway, I just kind of folded it up and didn't really act on it immediately. But in 2001, when 9/11 occurred, my wife was down having breakfast, and they shut down Trump Tower because they were concerned that somebody might fly into that building too.
Right.
And so my wife was trapped on the streets and couldn't go back up to we lived on the 62nd floor. She couldn't go up to the floor. So she didn't like that. That was like claustrophobia for her. She didn't want to be in New York while that was all going down. So she contacted a friend and got a helicopter and came and picked her up in the street and flew her to Philly and got a special service to take her to LA and another special service to take her. See, the commercial airlines were all shut down, but private was still open.
Right.
And so she went out to our place in Australia, and I was on my way to Australia when all this went down because I was speaking in Perth, passing through Sydney. And I told her when she got out there, I said, you know, I'm not scheduled to be in Australia but 4 times a year. We need to come up with plan B on our dynamic, because if you're not going to go back to New York, I need to come up with a plan B. And then all of a sudden I went, the ship. So for an anniversary present, I got her the ship. So that way she would not have to travel the world with all the headaches, and I could rendezvous wherever it was around the world. So that's why we got that. That was in 2001.
That's a heck of a gift. So, you know, we know you were in The Secret, which is a very, very famous documentary. And you just mentioned how the universe opened things up for you. If someone is really focused and really positive and has that gratitude towards their goals, perhaps a vision board, perhaps just the glass half full mentality, do you feel or know that the universe will open up for that person if they stay on that mindset?
Well,
because some people
I don't want
have
to.
bad luck, you know what I mean? Some people it just never ends.
Well, here's what I've observed. I mentioned it's the secret behind the secret, left out of the secret kind of thing. Every human being has a set of priorities, a set of values that are fingerprint specific to them. And no 2 people have the same hierarchy of values. And this hierarchy of values is evolving gradually or cataclysmically, depending on the events in your life. But whatever it is at any one moment, it's determining your perceptions, your decisions, and your actions. So my highest value on the list of values has been teaching since 17. And whatever's highest on your values, you're spontaneously inspired from within. It's an intrinsic value where you're disciplined, reliable, and focused. And the pulvinar nuclei in the thalamus, which is a gating and filtering area of the brain, will selectively bias information in favor of what you value most, and you will spot things in the environment synchronously that you wouldn't normally see unless you valued it. And so if you set a goal that is aligned and truly congruent with what you really value, and since your identity revolves around what you value most, that means you're really setting an authentic goal. Then you increase the probability of seeing opportunities, taking advantage of them, and acting on them. So the probability of you manifesting and not giving up towards your aim, your chief aim, just keeps going up. And you build incremental momentum towards an ever progressive achievement of that which is your innermost dominant thought. And your innermost dominant thought is always an expression of what you value most. But if you compare yourself to somebody else that you envy, that you put on a pedestal, and you are too humble to admit what you see in them is inside you, and you inject their values and cloud the clarity of your own objectives, your true objective, and then try to be somebody you're not, and try to pursue inauthentic fantasies that you think are all positive and amygdala-driven dopamine drives that aren't really truly things you're committed to, but are little whims that you go after. And you have a fantasy. Then you're automatically designed to have anxieties, doubts, uncertainties, fears, and tragic nightmares to keep breaking your addiction to the fantasy so you can go back to authenticity. You know, I had a lady come up to me after The Secret came out, probably 2007. And she said, Dr. DeMartini, I've watched the movie 20 times. I've read the book 6 times. And every day I go out to my mailbox and I know I'm going to get a multi-million-dollar check in there, but for some reason I just don't get it. What's wrong? What am I doing wrong? And I said to her, bluntly, I don't think she liked it. I said, have you considered finding a deeply meaningful service that contributes to another human being in an immutable, fair exchange and sustainable manner that you can't wait to get up in the morning and be of service to, so people can't wait to get your service, and then take a portion of whatever you earn and invest it in assets, because you will increase the probability of building wealth way more than fantasizing about some $1 million, multi-million dollar check popping in your mailbox.
Right.
Not that that can't occur, but the probabilities are not high.
Right.
I never became financially independent because of a fantasy of multi-million dollar checks popping in my mailbox. I became because I was willing to work diligent hours serving vast numbers of people in a more effective and efficient way than people who are offering similar services. And I was able to raise my fees to do so. And people are willing to pay it because they got value.
That's right.
If you give people value, you have all the right to now have the financial. There is abundance in the universe. There's no lack in the universe. There's no lack of people you can serve. There's no lack of opportunity to be of contribution. You know, my observation of the wealthiest people I know, and I know a lot of billionaires and a lot of multimillionaires. I know a lot of them. And they got there not because of fantasy. They got there because they found they found solutions to major problems that people couldn't find, and they solved them. I always say that when you're pursuing challenges that inspire you, that you want to solve, that serve vast numbers of people, you make fortunes.
It's exactly what's happening to me right now. I opened up a clinic 6 months ago, and it's slow. And then all of a sudden, boom. My Instagram went crazy just all of a sudden. And it's just that consistency of loving what you do and helping people. And, the first thing on my mind in the morning is, what can I do today to advance,
Yes. When your innermost dominant thought becomes your patients, their innermost dominant thought becomes you. They want to serve you. They want to refer to you. All right. What is your background? I see you have neuromuscular, skeletal, and spinal things. Are you a chiropractor? What is the background?
I'm a holistic doctor, and one of the specialties, is the posture. Yeah.
Yes. Fantastic. I also have a background as a chiropractor, so I've related to neuromuscular, skeletal, and holistic. I was very much in holistic back in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
But I am absolutely certain that when you can't wait to be of service to people, people can't wait to get your service.
That's right. And they'll pay for it.
And if you value yourself, if you don't value yourself and take a portion of whatever you earn and buy assets that go up in value, you'll keep buying consumables that go down in value. And people don't get wealthy by buying consumables. They get wealthy by buying assets.
Right.
I learned at age 27, and for 41 years, I've been buying assets every week. And that liberated me from, working because I had to. I worked because I lived to.
Now, I heard a story where when you were a young man, you were very much influenced by Paul Bragg, right?
He was the one that inspired me the night when I was 17.
I find that very in sync, because just a few episodes ago on this podcast, I interviewed Elaine LaLanne, who
Jack LaLanne's family.
Yes, and of course Jack LaLanne was inspired by Paul Bragg when he was a young man, and that's what set him on his health path. Yeah, so we got a Paul Bragg ripple effect here right now.
Well, Jack LaLanne's story and my story have a lot of overlap, and I know Patricia. I knew Patricia for years, and she's an amazing dynamo. But Jack LaLanne, when I was 2, he used to have a TV show in 1956 that America, he played every single day on America, and everybody was up working out, is late morning working out with him.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was around 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, and he was there making everybody work out. And my mom and I would work out to Jack LaLanne. Little did I know that Jack LaLanne, the guy that inspired him from being a pimple-faced weakling to being who he was the same guy that turned my life around. from somebody that never learned how to read. I didn't read till I was 18 to becoming a scholar.
Wow.
So, yeah, Paul Bragg was a very influential gentleman, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that gentleman.
It's pretty cool. And it just shows the effect that we can have on people. And, we're never really remembered because even the people that remember us die too. So, but the influence that you can have in your era can be just, it can be such an ocean, such an influence.
Can I share an interesting story about legacies?
Sure.
I teach a program called the Breakthrough Experience, which I've done 1,165 times now. And it's kind of a signature program that I do. And I was in Rome back in 1999 teaching that program.
Mm-hmm.
And afterwards, a gentleman and his wife asked if I would like to do some tours before my flight out late into the evening the next day, like to walk around and tour a little bit of Rome. And I said, I would love to. So the next day, his wife picked me up and took me through Rome and different areas that I hadn't seen. And we came upon a square right around lunchtime that was roped off and was covered in millions of red rose petals. The entire square is the size of like a little soccer field. The center of the square was a marble and bronze statued base and bronze statued Giordano Bruno, who is an astronomer, theologian, and philosopher.
Mm.
And he was a renegade. He believed in an infinite number of worlds in an infinite universe with infinite number of beings. And he was a mystic and was ridiculed and pretty well kicked out of almost every imaginable place in Europe for his ideas, because it went against Aristotle's ideas and the finite world, of the primal mobile and the concentric spheres that even Copernicus was trapped in his revolutionary times. So he believed this, and they didn't like it. The church didn't like it. It went against what the church said, because Catholicism meant universal, and it didn't want people to have something bigger than the world that was centric by the earth. They had a geocentric world, and all of a sudden he had now a universe that had stars and planets going around stars, and he had that all mapped out, and that messed up the Catholic Church.
Right.
So they basically put him in prison, and he refused to submit to their beliefs because he knew he was right. And finally, they were going to burn him at the stake, and they did. And on the day they burned him at the stake, they asked him if he had anything to say before he went up in smoke. He said, "Yes, I do." And he looked at the torchbearers that were on the either side about to light him. He says, "I'll bet your fear in lighting this torch is greater than mine. For though you may destroy my mortal body, you will never destroy my message and immortal soul, and you release it to the world today. So thank you." So they burned him. Before they did that, he wrote a posthumous biography of how he wanted to be perceived 500 years into the future. The impact he wanted to have. Well, 400 years from the day they burned him at the stake was the day I was there. And 400 years after they burned him at the stake, what he wrote in the biography was now true. The world is appreciating his ideas. It's now mainstream. He was a genius ahead of his times. Mm-hmm. Not in everything he taught, but in certain things. And so that night, when I was in flight, I wrote a 23-page posthumous biography of how I wanted to be perceived 1,000 years into the future. So I catapulted myself into a bigger vision. Seneca, the Roman poet, said, "You measure an individual by their most distant ends. The magnitude of space and time and their innermost dominant thought will determine the level of their conscious evolution." So I just went ahead and thought, because every time you do something that's truly deeply meaningful, that's aligned with who you really are, you keep expanding your space and time horizons and give yourself permission to do something greater. And that greatness goes beyond eventually your own life. And you start thinking perpetuity and what you can do into the future beyond your life. So that night I wrote that, and I was inspired like Tom Cruise was in Jerry Maguire when he wrote his mission statement, one of those moments.
Right.
And that was 1999, right at 2000. In 2008, I got asked to speak at the Milk Abbey in Austria over the Danube at a conference called the Walsell Conference, where 200 people were invited, media from around the world were there, and there were 12 speakers, and there were 6 major issues that we're trying to solve in the world, and each speaker was contributing to a world solution. And on the Saturday night of this weekend, which is a Thursday, Friday, Saturday kind of thing, they had a ceremony that I was not aware of or expecting. And they asked us to come down to the library at the Milk Abbey. If you ever get a chance to see the library, it looks like the Sistine Chapel. It's magnificent. So we went down there, and all the people from the conference were there, the media was there, and the speakers were there. And we lined the speakers into a semicircle, 12 people. And they handed us a stainless steel cylinder probably about 12 inches long and about 3.5 to 4 inches maybe across, that was stainless steel sealed and vacuum sealed. And inside it, each of the speakers had something different, but mine was 365 quotations from books I'd written and the DeMartini method on conflict resolution that I had spoken about, calligraphied on calligraphy paper with beautifully gold print, beautifully gold imprinted and sealed. And then we were taken down from the main library into a end of the library into a vault, which is a special room where they store rare manuscripts and rare, tablets and things. And it was called the Infinity of Divinity Library Room. And in there, each of us got to put our cylinder into a 12-foot Infinity of Divinity library shelf. And so I stuck it first right in the center. I put it right in the center of the Infinity of Divinity library shelf. Now, I talked about the Infinity of Divinity in my lectures for many years, so it was so resonant. And then they locked the room and they said, this will be there for 1,000 years. So I realized that the posthumous biography that I had written possibly had an impact on the probability of having information to last 1,000 years and be read 1,000 years from now.
Wow.
So I'm a firm believer that we go around saying we're immortal souls, but where's our immortal goals? We usually have a contradiction between what we say we believe and what we actually are living. So I'm a firm believer in incrementally giving ourselves permission to set ever greater contributive goals that inspire us to contribute to the world.
So the biography that you wrote, almost like a vision board, it kind of puts it out there to the universe.
Well, mine's a vision book. It's 33 volumes. It's nearly 10,000 pages. It has all my goals, my posthumous biography. It has my obituary. It has all of my metrics of everything I've set out to do. Every time I have written a goal, which are thousands of them, I keep metrics on, am I accomplishing them? And if not, then I refine the goal or find the new strategy. So I keep metrics of everything I do. I'm a real metric freak. And so like if I do a podcast, like this is 411th podcast so far this year. So I keep records of every podcast, every TV show, every radio show, every newspaper, every magazine, every speech, every keynote, every movie I do, everything. We keep records of everything, how many people we're reaching, the impact we're having. And so I'm a firm believer that if you're going to set a goal, then it's worth metricing to make sure you achieve it. So I have 33 volumes of that and a gratitude journal, which you are already in. I could pull it up and show you if you want.
That's very
If that's
cool.
of interest. The other day I had this gentleman just passed away, Bob McGrath from Sesame Street. But on my birthday, November 25th, he sent and sang happy birthday to me. And he died just shortly after that. I couldn't
Wow.
believe it. And Sir Darren Jacklin, who's a gentleman is knighted, they sang to me, which is lovely.
So these metrics, this record that you're keeping, this keeps things going in the universe, and also something you
Yeah,
could.
this is I do this every day. Here's if you can imagine this. I don't know if you've seen this picture here, but I got invited to do something that not everybody gets to do. When I was in, I'm up on the largest crane, and I went through a simulator training, and I got with supervisors. I went up and I loaded 42, with their help, 42 containers from a ship onto trucks, just to experience what it's like to be in the newest and tallest crane in the world, way up in the sky.
Wow.
And I also had the opportunity to, that's my ship there, in the right there, the one.
Wow.
But then this is the President Perez Center for Peace and Innovation. This is the president's office. All his awards and stuff. It's amazing. So I have amazing opportunities every day.
Every day.
So I always say, what a great year I had today. Here's a friend of mine who's a movie producer that's been a student of mine, and he's just writing a thank you letter. I mean, I just get to meet and go places, amazing places, to meet amazing people on a daily basis. So this is one of 33 volumes. And this is just a few end pages of it.
Wow.
So I can show you, let me stop the share for a second and then show you something else here.
While you're doing that, what would happen if everyone did this?
Well, they'd end up being strange as I am, and I don't know if that's what everybody would want. I don't know if that would be wise. So I keep records, and volume 1 is a very big document.
When did you start volume 1?
1972.
Would
So
you
I'll
ever
show you
consider,
that.
would you ever publish this one day?
Yeah, this is a posthumous document that'll be published. I probably won't publish it before I pass, but this is the State of My Mission text. So this is what I dedicated to starting I founded my institute really in 1972, but I didn't formally structure it legally and everything else. But it's was formalized back then. But you can see it goes back to 1972 here. Everything on here, from the mission statement of the company to the primary strategies, all the disciplines that I've studied, 300 different disciplines that I've written about. And the courses, I keep records and metrics of everything. I'm a generation of everything that I get to do every year. The only thing in this book is what I'm inspired to fulfill in this world. It has my uniqueness, my standards, my values, what I'm intending, what I accomplish, has every one of the goals. 33 volumes of this.
Wow.
It's nearly 10,000 pages. I was introduced the other day, I was speaking at the Guggenheim Museum, and an influential Jewish woman from South Africa is the one that organized it. And I'm not even sure what country I was in, somewhere in Africa, Northern Africa or something at the time. And I came in on Zoom. And she introduced me as a bit of a freak. Instead of an enigma, which I thought would probably be a more appropriate term,
Yeah.
she said, the man you're about to listen to is just not, it's just different. So I'm not even going to try to introduce him, but just get ready because it's you're going to get something different.
Right.
Which was true. I mean, I gave them a presentation that they enjoyed. So I've been pretty blessed. I was told, I was born on Thanksgiving Day in America, and I was told by my mom when I was 4 that if I'm grateful for what I have, I get more to be grateful for.
Nice.
So I document my gratitudes every day.
So this will be released after you pass. How do you feel about death? That's a big topic on this podcast.
Well, I have been working with death since 1976. And I developed a methodology on dissolving grief and preparing people for passing. And I've got it down to a science. I tell people, I give you a money back guarantee on it. And people don't believe it's possible, but I've been scrutinized under university studies and everything else, and it has never failed. I figured out how and why people have a fear of death and grief. There's 2 forms of grief. The perception of loss of that which you seek, which in the brain, in the amygdala, it represents prey, and therefore the fear of loss of prey is starvation. So in the brain, whenever you perceive a loss of something you seek, it represents starvation in the brain, and you have a reaction. And the other one is the fear of gain of that which you're trying to avoid, which is predator, being eaten. So the 2 most fundamental levels of grief are the fear of loss of food and fear of being eaten, which is a survival response. It's an amygdala response. And I've mapped out the chemistry, I've mapped out the actual nuclear pathways, the valency systems and how it works in hippocampus and how we store it. I mean, it's mapped out really nicely. Now, what's interesting is I've been watching people who've dealt with grief and death since 1976. And what really spurred me to do that is I was surfing in El Salvador at La Libertad. And I'd surfed all morning, and I came in and just had a quick breakfast. And then walking through the town, I ran into about 250 people or so. And they were celebrating and wearing colors and partying and singing and stuff. And I was going, "Que pasa? Que pasa? What's happening here?" And finally, I ran into somebody that could speak some English. And he says, "Well, our mayor just passed, and we're celebrating the freedom of his spirit. He's no longer contained by a mortal form." And I thought, ooh, cool approach. I like this. This is new. Because when I was growing up, you had wore black and dismal and mourning and all that stuff on death. And I go, here's a complete new frame of death. And I thought, this is interesting. Their perception of death is different than some countries. So that made me curious, what causes people to celebrate relief or grief over death? When Trump took out Soleimani, who had been a terrorist, he was a hero in Iran, and they mourned him. 5 million people came out to mourn his death. But in America, we celebrated his killing because he was one of the leading terrorists.
Right.
So we were celebrating it and joyful over his death, and they're mourning over the death because they perceived the positives and now lost the positives, and we were perceiving the negatives and now lost the negatives. And so we were relieving and they were grieving. And I thought, okay, there's a good example. Now, after taking 4,000 people who have got deaths and who are mourning, someone with prolonged grief syndrome, if you ask them, what specific trait, action, or inaction do you perceive this individual displayed or demonstrated that you admired most and now miss most? And if I nail it down and write them all down, there's an average of around 10. Believe it or not, that's all people really are missing. They might have, I've seen it go up to 26. I've seen it be only 4, but an average is around 10, 12, 8, 12. And then they just can't think of anything else. And I make them write down everything that they think they're missing. And I guarantee you, It was something they admired, infatuated with, that triggered dopamine and oxytocin and enkephalons and, vasopressin and oxytocin and things. And it was a pleasure that they are now grieving the loss of. But they never grieve the loss of the yelling, the screaming, the dirty clothes, the hair in the sink. Nobody ever wrote down the things they despised, disliked, or hated about the individual that died. They only wrote down the things that they admired and are missing. And I realized that anything that you are perceiving that's got pauses, you feel the loss of. You're going to grieve the loss of.
Mm-hmm.
Just like if you have a boyfriend and all of a sudden he goes off with another girl, you're devastated. But if you are resenting the guy and you're tired of him and he goes off another girlfriend, you celebrate with your girlfriends. Well, he's finally gone. I'm freed.
Right.
So it's our association and our imbalanced perceptions that set us up for the grief. Now, if I go in there and identify at that exact moment when they pass who emerge in their life to compensate for that. When I was 14, I lived on the streets, and I realized that I never missed anything in my family. It was always morphing and changing form with different people. And so I learned really amazing observations back then. And people don't lose anything. It just morphs into another form, and they're not honoring the new form, and they're comparing the old form. They're infatuated with the old form and not honoring the new form. And so they're holding on to the grief of the loss of the form. But if I ask them what's the new form and make sure it's quantitatively equal and show them there's been a transformation instead of a loss, it's eye-opening. And then if I go in there and then find out what were the downsides to the trait, action, inaction that you're infatuated with, and what are the benefits of the new people offering it, and level that playing field out so the qualitative is balanced, I can guarantee that it's impossible for them to have grief. I've done that 4,000 times and I haven't failed yet. And people think, what? They want to believe that you're supposed to grieve, you need to grieve, and it's absolutely not true. I remember I was in Keio University in Japan, and they didn't believe it. And so they put me through a test, and they put me through a pilot study of all these grieving people. And it took 2 hours and 17 minutes on average to clear them all. And they followed them for 18 months afterwards and checked in every month. Not once did they have any grief for 18 months. And finally they wrote a paper on it. They go, this is something unheard of. We've never seen this. And no other methodology was doing that. So I'm certain about that. I've been doing it every single week since 1984 clinically. And I'm certain I can do that. Now, the fear of death, if you look very carefully, the fear of death is the fear of loss of your pride and the fear of loss of your fantasies about what you envision in the future that are more positives than negatives. Because if you're depressed and you're feeling shame, you actually will take and contemplate taking your life. I ask people in my seminars, how many of you ever thought about taking your life? And most hands go up. I said, look at the moment you did. You were below equilibrium, you were ashamed, and you felt like you were depressed. And you didn't want life to continue that way. But if you're elated and you're fantasizing and you're proud, you're going to feel the loss. So the fear of death is not the fear of death. It's the fear of loss of all the things you're proud of in yourself, which is a facade, and it's not even an authentic you. It's not really your unconditionally loving self. And it's all the fantasies that you think are going to happen that you're afraid of losing. And that withdrawal from that is what the fear of death is. So I have people that are sitting there and, about to go to hospice care with cancers, and they have me come in, and I go in there and I dissolve all their fantasies or whatever. And so they just transition out smoothly.
That's great.
So there's no, when you actually love somebody, when you stop and think about it, when you actually love somebody, I've never met anybody that could look me straight in the face and tell me that I hope that they're grieving when I die. Not one person's ever told me, when I die, I hope that everybody around me is grieving. Everybody wants people to live their life to the fullest and get on with their life and do something extraordinary and remember them for their contribution.
That's right.
So it's a real selfish act. Grieving is really a selfish act. It's an animal behavior that people don't know they have an alternative to. So I'm trying to educate people as I travel the world.
Yeah. In my latest book, I mentioned that, we're inherently selfish. And if your mother dies, it's a big deal. But millions of mothers just died and you don't care. So,
Well, it's not affecting you. So if it doesn't affect you,
that's right.
But what's interesting is um, the second it does affect you, the second you had an infatuation with part of them. See, if you're in a relationship with somebody and you're in the first few weeks of a relationship and you're infatuated with them, you're jealous, you're insecure, you're frightened of losing them while you're infatuated.
Hmm.
And you'd sacrifice for them. Whenever you're the underdog in a relationship, you'll altruistically sacrifice for another person and sacrifice your own highest values to try to fit into their life for fear of loss of them. And then once you resent them, you turn it around. Now you project your values onto them and expect them to live in your values, and you're willing now to sacrifice them for you.
Right.
So sacrificing yourself for others or sacrificing others for yourself, both are futile.
Hmm.
Loving people and balancing out your mind and having reflective awareness where the seer, the seeing, and the seen are the same, and you're not too proud or too humble to admit what you see in others inside you, and you own all of the behaviors you see in them inside you, is liberating, because now you love them. And when you love somebody, they become present. It's only in the amygdala that you have the assignment of this past and future memory and imagination game. I always say memory and imagination store illusions until you're ready for the truth of love. When you're in a moment of true love, there's no time and there's no perception of gain or loss. The master lives in a world of transformation, never the illusions of gain and loss.
Before I ask you my last question, where can people come find your work?
Well, I'm on the internet pretty much. So I would say if you would just go under Dr. John DeMartini or Dr. DeMartini, or go to my website, drdemartini.com, or go to my value determination process on the website or whatever, you can probably find out what's going down. There are thousands of educational things on there: radio, television, newspapers, magazines. You could spend the rest of your life. You may not be a Buddhist when you get on there, but you may have to end up a Buddhist just to believe in reincarnation, because you're going to have to come back, because you won't be able to read it all in the time you have on this life.
You created a rabbit hole.
Yeah, rabbit hole. But there's a lot of information on there. But that tells you what I'm doing that's, public, and then, YouTubes and all this basic stuff that people do.
With all the stuff that you do, including keeping your whole biography day by day, I mean, you're doing a lot. You've done a lot. You're doing a lot. You're not going to slow down. It's obvious. How do you balance family and personal with that? Because you mentioned you're married.
Well, no, I'm not married now.
Okay.
My wife passed away. A number of years back.
Hmm.
So I'm dating a magnificent girl that is stunning, who lives in a different country. Now, she's extremely busy. She's a very famous lady, and she's extremely busy, and I'm extremely busy. So neither one of us have as a top values relationships.
Mm-hmm.
If I look at my values, it's teach, research, write, travel, then come relationships, family kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And she's similar. And see, I learned a long time ago, don't ever try to live in other people's values. Everybody's going to project their values onto you and try to get you to do what they think is important to you. And I just thank them, but no thank you. Thank you, but no thank you. I know what my values are. I know what's important to me. I stick to them. My kids are grown up. They're, 38, 35, 32. They're independent. And they rendezvous with me periodically. But they have their own lives and do their own things. We chat on WhatsApp and Skype most every day. That's not true. Multiple times a week, because sometimes my time zone and their time zones are completely different. But I'm a firm believer that there's nothing missing. At the level of the human soul, there's nothing missing. At the level of the human senses, things appear to be missing. And the things that appear to be missing are things you're too proud or too humble to admit you have.
Hmm.
I don't live in a lack mode where there's something missing in my life.
Hmm.
And so I think as a result of that, I have a lot of adaptability and resiliency about whatever happens in our dynamic. So when I see my girlfriend, I'm inspired. When I'm not, but I hear she's achieving everything she's doing and I'm achieving, I'm inspired. So I don't have to see her every day. She doesn't have to see me every day. And I believe that I live in a big friggin' house. Earth is the house.
Right.
And in some people, they think of a little 9 to 5 job and they think of a little house, a suburb or whatever. That is so foreign to me. I don't live in that world. I either fly or sail from country to country. And I would say the universe is my playground. The world is my home. Every country is a room in the house and every city is a platform to share my heart and soul. So I'm never away from my family. I live in a big house. And instead of walking to a room to have a conversation with them, I get on WhatsApp. I don't see space or time relevant. It doesn't mean much. So I come from that perspective, and you attract people in your life that resonate. So I'm not. I don't have a 9 to 5 thinking, or a suburban house thinking kind of mentality. That's not my life.
Good stuff. Dr. DeMartini, it's been a pleasure talking to you today.
Well, thank you for the interview.
And I'm happy to be in your biography as it keeps growing.
Oh, you interviewed, and it's a gift to me because you're helping me fulfill my mission that I set out when I was 17.
Cool.
50 years ago.
Thanks for listening to Inner Peace with Dr. Reese. If this episode opened your heart, feel free to share on social media and tell your loved ones. Also, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, may peace be with you.